So, how often do you cry? I want to know. And do you remember the last time you cried? I remember the last time I cried. I can be a little bit of a crybaby, and I actually enjoy crying because I feel like so much better and so relieved after I'm done. So I want you to grab a handkerchief or grab some Kleenexes because we're going to be talking about crying today and see also how we can manage this issue in our lives. I'm Sherry at Sherry Together, and this is a space that's designed for you so that you can grow and thrive. Today we are going to be talking about crying. Actually, we're going to be going to the narrative in John chapter 20. And actually there's four accounts of Christ's resurrection, and we're going to just be looking at some details in this account that really draw my attention. First, we're going to see what are the first words of the resurrected Christ. What did he say? Did he say, go preach and make disciples? We're going to look at that. But first, I want to define crying. We're going to look at four different types of categories of tears, right? So that we can define where we are and what we're going to be talking about. The first category would be tears of joy, right? When you have an overwhelming situation and you are just so happy that you are crying about joy. We're not going to be talking about that one. The second one would be like a cry baby. Babies cry. And to cry in our immaturity or when we want our own way, we're not going to be talking about that, right? Those tears when we're angry and I want things my way. We're not going to be talking about those tears. That's category 2. 3, are crocodile tears. Those are bad tears. I would even classify them as evil, because when we use tears to manipulate, that's just like not right. And so there's a lot to be said, but we're not going to go into that. The fourth category, and this is where we're going to land, and they're tears of grief, deep pain. And so this is where we're going to land. Because, if you are going through a wilderness experience, I think that tears are going to be part of it. And if they aren't, start crying to relieve some of the stress, because if you're in a wilderness, it's not an easy situation. So tears are a great way to relieve that stress. That's just a little tip on the side there. But anyway, let's just dive right into the passage there. If you have a Bible, grab it, read it during this week. It's going to bless your life. But there in John 20, okay, we find that Jesus had been buried. He was crucified. He was buried. He had said he was going to rise again the third day. But the disciples were just down and out. All the followers, they just didn't understand this. You see, Lazarus had come back from the grave, but Jesus had told him to come forth. And even though Jesus had said he was going to come, they just didn't get it. So here they come rushing early in the morning, these women, Mary Magdalene and some other women, and they come and they arrive at the grave and they see that the stone has been rolled away. So they go run and tell the disciples, and Peter comes running, John comes running. They see, wow, Jesus isn't here. And they go home. And it says that Mary stayed. It says she stayed there. Actually, it says that she stood outside She stood outside weeping. And I can only expect that she was overtaken in her grief. This loss of the person who had been so good to her, the only person that really understood her, that knew her, and he was gone. And her grief was extreme. And I do just have one little thing to say about this. When you look at the account and how it goes progressing, she was the first to get there. She was involved in calling the disciples, and she was the one that stayed when everyone else left. The first to get there, and the last to leave. And I would say, you who linger for God will see a great benefit in your life. And this is what we're going to see today in a brief way. And so here, Mary is weeping outside the grave. She stoops down to look where they had laid Jesus, and he wasn't there any longer. And she's very afflicted. And she sees two angels. And the angels ask her, "Why are you weeping?" Grief, the mourning. The angels asked her a question. And when she turns around, you see, when we're going in a direction, a lot of times God wants to show us something, but we need to turn around. And even when she turned around, she didn't recognize him. She thinks he's a gardener. She didn't recognize Jesus. And Jesus asks her, "Woman, why are you crying?" And I just think, wow. The first words out of Jesus' mouth when he was raised from the dead wasn't, "Mary, why are you crying?" Mary stopped crying. It was, "Woman, why are you crying?" And I'd like to suggest to you that today, God is asking you, "Woman, why are you crying?" Because God sees you in that moment of grief. And God is near in that moment of grief. And even though you might not understand it, and you might be overwhelmed, and you might be overtaken in your situation that's very real. Mary's situation was real. And Jesus says, "Woman, why are you crying?" And here I want to just linger one moment and talk about crying. Because with crying, it's being able to identify that why. This is, why are you crying? And I love Jesus because he's always asking questions. And that's usually one of the best ways to teach us, is by asking a person a question. Why are you crying? Right? Because it makes me have to stop and think. And so the value in a why is the stop, right? I have to stop and say, what's going on? What's going on? And identify, what is it that's bothering me, right? Why am I crying? Is it a boyfriend? Is it a husband? Is it a child? Is it a frustration with my career? Identify the source of frustration, the source of irritation. When you get to the end of you, and Jesus says, "I'm here," right? And so the power of the why, just don't cry to cry, right? Ask yourself that inside question, why? Stop, why? And you know, when we look inside and we have Jesus by our side, we're on a good road. Because a lot of times we want to blame people. "Oh, I'm crying because of this person, because of them." And really, what I have to do is look inside and see what I can do. Because maybe I want my husband to change, or my child to change, or my friend to change, or a situation to change, but I can't change them. So I have to look at the situation and say, well, what's bothering me and what can I do to change it, right? So looking at the way crying works, right? What can I do? So it really can be a tool for me. And when you think of tears, as women, we cry more, and we're intuitive, right? I feel like a lot of times as women, we have that intuition and we know something's coming. It makes us more sensitive, more aware. We're more relational, right? When things aren't going right, it's a frustration, it's an irritation, and maybe it affects men, but maybe it doesn't affect them to the point where you'll be able to see tears, whereas like with a woman, yes. As women, we have like that sixth sense, right? It's like we can discern that a storm is brewing before there's a cloud in the sky. And so that's what we can say about crying. And when Jesus sees her, he doesn't command her, Mary, stop crying, right? Shush, just don't cry. I know that's been my experience, right? With being married or my sons or other men in my life, it's just like they get uncomfortable and they just they don't want to know why you're crying. They just don't want you to cry. So just stop, right? But there's a why. And so don't suppress the deeper emotion, because crying is a release mechanism. There's such a thing as a good cry, to just get that load off of you. Take it to Jesus. Take it to him in prayer. Lay your emotions in front of him. Sort of like way back in Joshua, and in 1 Samuel, when Hannah comes before God and she really wants to have a child, and she's pouring herself out in tears, but she's crying before the Lord, right? And so don't bottle up those negative emotions. Pinpoint them. Because if you don't, they'll lead to more stress, sickness, depression. And so then you're suppressing something, and you're on meds, you drink alcohol, you be in drugs, and you're not really dealing with the issues at hand. And so I also think the difference between what? Well, there's a lot of differences, but you think an animal and a human, the people who are into evolution, but there's a big difference between a human and an animal. And two of the things I think of just biologically is that humans can laugh, right? We have the ability for laughter, and we have the ability to cry. And it's something beautiful, because it's something deeper, because man has a soul, and that soul is the part that unites us to God. And so there's something very moving and stirring when we are stirred and moved to tears, right? And that moving moves God. And so we don't want to stifle that. I say that tears are soul words. They're eloquent. And when we don't allow our tears and we're suppressing them, we're really lying to ourselves, right? We're living in a state of denial. And then we'll live in a state of fear, because since I'm not facing my problems, then I'm going to live in a state of fear. Maybe a flight mode. Instead of facing my problems, I'm running from my problems. And 2 Timothy 1:7 says, God hasn't given me a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind. So I want to suggest to you that when we are crying these tears that are really coming from the depths of our soul, the anguish of our soul, that they not only move God, but that they also have a purpose of purifying our lives, right? We feel better. They clarify. It's like you cry and then it's like you have peace. You'll be able to see things more clearly. And that when we allow ourselves to express what's in our soul, it really suggests a fierceness, a power, and an essence. Because it's our soul. And so it's a big lie to think that our tears don't move God. You think. We come into this world crying, right? And there's nothing that moves us more than hearing a baby cry. A baby cries and everyone's like, oh, what do we do? Everyone goes running to see what's wrong. So we'll leave that there with the crying. Jesus asks a second question. He says, Mary, woman, why are you crying? And he asks her, what are you seeking? And Jesus asks you today, why are you crying? Why? Discern it. What are you seeking? And Mary was seeking something that had already been answered. She was seeking her Lord. She says, I'm looking for him, I'm looking for where they laid him. The idea is right. He's dead. He's like a burden. It's like something I have to pick up and carry. So here her intention with love is to pick up and carry his body because he's dead. And the resurrected Lord Jesus is standing firm, invincible, immovable. She's seeking him and he's standing right in front of her. And that's when he says, Mary. And she says, Rabboni, which is teacher. And then he tells her to go and tell the disciples. 2 questions. Woman, why are you crying? What are you seeking? They go hand in hand because we cry about what we're seeking. And so I really want to encourage you that don't suppress what's going on in your life. Don't hold it in. That Christ, the resurrected Lord, is concerned about you. Your tears move him. And many of the things that you're crying about, they've already been answered. Maybe you just don't see it yet. And those are the words I wanted to leave with you today. Woman, why are you crying? What are you seeking? Reflective questions to make us stop. Stop and think. Identify and move forward. And that you'd find him. Remember, as you share this with other people that you know are going through a hard time, it's our responsibility. If we know of people, and this is an encouragement to you, share it with others. You can find me either on Facebook, Sherry Together, or on YouTube, Sherry Together. I love you, and I'll see you next week. God bless. Bye-bye.